Hello and welcome to Ecology and Me, a citizen scientist podcast for curious humans. I'm Kate Douglas, curious human, and today we're talking about mushrooms. So when I used to live in New York City, my roommates and I would visit a farmer's market on the weekends that had the most amazing mushroom vendor. We would try shiitake, maitake, lion's mane, so many delicious mushroom beauties. Our household was obsessed. We would eat mushrooms sauteed with butter and soy sauce in the morning, and then put mushrooms in our stews at night. Yum. So, I was unsurprised to get this question from my old roommate, Hannah.
I wanted to know where mushrooms grow, because if we wanted to grow our own, I was curious if we needed poop.
Hannah's question made me giggle. And then it made me sit down and think, where do mushrooms grow? And how do they grow? And why do they grow? I knew exactly who to call to get some more answers.
My name is Olga Tzogas. I own and operate Smugtown Mushrooms up in Rochester, New York, in the Great Lakes bioregion on traditional Haudenosaunee lands. Yeah, I've been doing mushroom stuff for a while. I can't even believe it's been over 15 years now that I've been obsessed with mushrooms.
I met Olga when I took her 3-part class on mushrooms through the amazing Urban Cura Collective. Olga blew me away with her encyclopedic knowledge and deep tenderness for all things fungi that goes back to when she was a kid.
I always liked mushrooms, okay? I grew up in like a Greek diner culture. I'm like first generation Greek and, always liked the mushrooms that were on whatever foods and stuff. And my mom made like a really beautiful mushroom dish on New Year's Day with lots of parsley and olive oil and wine and lemon, and so good.
Okay, so Olga, please send me that recipe. And also, let's talk through some mushroom 101. First off, fungi, mushrooms, teach us some vocab.
So a mushroom is a fungus, but a fungus isn't always a mushroom. Fungi is like the umbrella, and all these other organisms are like chilling underneath it, and they're like categorized in different ways based on what they're doing ecologically. And now a lot of times what they're doing like on a genetic level.
A recent study estimated there may be as many as 5.1 million different fungal species. That's around the human population of New Zealand and about 1/5 the sheep population of New Zealand, if that gives you any idea. So again, to recap, the fungi is the entire organism, but the mushroom is just the fruit that helps the fungi reproduce. Think of the fungus like the pear tree, and the mushroom is like the pear.
A classic mushroom life cycle where the spore finds a nice, warm, moist place to germinate. It starts expanding into these strands of cells of hyphae, and then they find a mate and they start multiplying into mycelium.
Mycelium is kind of like a multicellular yeast that can grow into big structures like mushrooms. Mycelium takes in food by excreting enzymes that break down materials like wood or plant waste or old bread into digestible morsels. And as it grows, it makes a network of these long microscopic threads.
Fungi grow, and like mycelium grows in a way that is very decentral, and like they're able to literally grow cells to move and expand. And we see that where when we're cultivating, we can have a jar of sawdust and we put a dime size amount of mycelium into that jar of sawdust. And then a week or two later, that sawdust is completely myceliated, and the amount of cells that was in that little dime-sized mycelium quadrupled a million folds. Okay, not all fungi reproduce like that. We have yeasts that are like, they produce by budding. It's like 1 just becomes 2.
It's like when I eat cookies. 1 becomes 2, becomes 4, becomes a lot. Okay, so where does all this growing happen?
The mushroom, whether we're talking like the classic cap and stem mushroom or a shelf mushroom, these macroscopic fungi, right, that we're seeing with our naked eye in the woods or in the field or walking down the street and the sidewalk. And they can be anywhere. They are on every continent. And They are, in the urban scape. I mean, I see mushrooms in the cities all the time, growing on the trees, lacing the sidewalks, or even in city parks, in mulches and landscaped areas. And a lot of times we see mushrooms where there's decomposition, where there's a high rate of turnover of nutrients. So like in a forest or in a place where trees are allowed to fall and leaves are allowed to fall, or a high composted rich area, like your compost in your backyard.
Each type of mushroom has its own growing needs. Some, like shiitake, grow on hardwood sawdust or wood. White button mushrooms and portobellos grow on composted manure. Oyster mushrooms will grow on all kinds of things like straw, cardboard, even coffee grounds. Love that. Some scientists are even studying if fungi can grow on and break down plastic waste. Whoa.
It's basically, they're everywhere. They're basically everywhere. And if they're not, then lichen are probably there.
Do you know about lichens? Because let me tell you, this is some wild stuff. Lichens are actually a partnership between fungi and algae. And did you know algae are actually not considered plants, animals, or fungi? They're in a league all their own. What? And so lichens partner algae up with fungi, and the fungi lets the algae live all over the world in these different climates, photosynthesizing happily. Listeners, please help me find a lichen expert because this sounds really freaky and I am into it. So back to the mushrooms. Does this mean we can grow mushrooms ourselves? Heck yes, it does.
I love getting folk pumped on cultivating and like realizing that they can do it themselves.
Smugtown Mushrooms actually sells growing kits that you can order. They're so simple. They're so amazing. There's a link to them in the show notes. These are truly a magical way to have mushrooms around you all the time because there's a lot of lessons we have to learn from mushrooms.
No, it's all connected. And I think that that's the thing that is really cool about mycology. There's this web, it's that mycelial web. It's that mycelial web, and that we're all connected. None of us are free till we're all free. No one's water is clean till all of our waters are clean, and it's all connected.
So, recap. Mushrooms are the fruiting bodies of fungi, and fungi is actually more similar to humans than plants. They're growing everywhere, all the time, on all kinds of things, even poop. And we have a lot to learn from these amazing beings. If you want to support the podcast, visit my Patreon where you could submit questions for future episodes. Please send me all of your burning ecology questions and we can learn the answer together. Thank you for listening in. I'm Kate Douglas. Keep asking questions. This episode was recorded, mixed, and produced by me. Theme song is by the amazing Matthew Dean Marsh. Follow us on social at Ecology and Me.